In every neighborhood, there's a line sometimes marked by fences, sometimes by unspoken rules. Most people tiptoe around it, some ignore it. And then, there's the one who dares to cross it without ever looking back. I moved to Ashland Pines to escape noise, not to make it. Quiet streets, tall trees, neighbors who minded their business. That's all I wanted. But what started with an entitled SUV in my garage turned into something bigger. A challenge. A reckoning. And somehow a strange kind of awakening. This isn't a story about revenge, or even about justice. It's a story about space, boundaries, and what happens when one person finally decides enough is enough. Ethan Weller wasn't a man who invited trouble. After a bitter divorce and 15 years of corporate burnout, he traded his fast-paced tech life for a quieter one, tucked into the sleepy suburb of Maple Hollow, just outside Austin. He liked silence, he liked boundaries, and above all, he liked knowing that the space he owned was his and his alone. Which is why the sight that greeted him on Tuesday afternoon stopped him cold. There it was, a gleaming, silver Porsche Cayenne parked neatly inside his garage. At first, Ethan thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe a delivery driver had taken a wrong turn, or a neighbor had temporarily parked it there in an emergency. But as he stepped closer, his optimism began to crumble. The garage door had been left wide open, as if someone had proudly presented this little power move to the world. Balanced perfectly on the hood of the car was a half-finished iced latte, its condensation still fresh, and the caramel syrup clinging to the sides like the remnants of arrogance. He set his grocery bag down on the porch, heart pulsing, with a mixture of confusion and slowly rising irritation. Then he glanced across the street, and there she was, Diana Kingsley, the self-declared queen of the neighborhood, exuding all the grace of a woman who believed laws were more like guidelines and that boundaries were merely suggestions. Mid-40s, stunning in a professionally curated way, and the type who wore silk robes like armor. Diana stood in her driveway, Bluetooth earpiece glowing and a confident smirk dancing on her lips. Ethan marched across the street, careful not to let his frustration bleed into full-blown anger. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice level. "Do you happen to know who parked a Porsche in my garage?" Without skipping a beat, she looked up from her phone. "Yes, that would be mine." There was a moment of silence, so thick it felt like the sky paused. "I'm sorry," Ethan blinked. Diana sipped from her matching coffee cup and waved a manicured hand like she was brushing away a gnat. "It was empty. You weren't using it." "You parked in my garage?" She laughed lightly. "Your driveway is sloped, Ethan. My Porsche can't handle that incline without scratching. I figured you'd understand. You seem like the type." "What type is that, exactly?" "You know, reasonable." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Well, I'm going to need you to move it, now." "I will." "Just not this minute. I'm on a Zoom call with the Singapore office." She gestured toward her earpiece, as if the global economy depended on her. "This is my property," Ethan said, taking a step closer. "You can't just decide it's yours when it's convenient." "You're overreacting." Her voice was ice and satin. "This is a community, Ethan. We help each other. It's just a garage." "No," he said calmly. "It's not. It's mine." Without another word, Diana turned and walked back into her house, letting the front door shut with a soft but deliberate click. Ethan stood in her driveway for a few seconds, stunned. Then, something inside him, something that had laid dormant through years of passive tolerance and conflict avoidance, snapped to life, not in anger, but in calculation. He turned around, walked back across the street, stepped into his home, and pulled up the interface for his smart security system. A few swipes, a confirmation code, and the garage door slid shut. Then, with one final tap on his screen, he locked it, remotely, permanently. And just like that, the Porsche and whatever entitled air floated around it was sealed inside. Ethan made himself a sandwich, packed a weekend bag, and headed out of town. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Diana had returned to the garage just moments before to grab her tablet from the passenger seat. And now, she was trapped inside. The first 15 minutes inside the garage were filled with disbelief. Diana Kingsley had paced back and forth, waiting for the familiar whir of the garage door opening. She had assumed Ethan must have noticed her re-entering. After all, she wasn't exactly subtle. Her heels had clicked like gunshots on the concrete, and she hadn't bothered to be quiet. Why would she? But as the minutes ticked by, no one came. The door didn't budge. The lights, connected to a motion sensor, flickered off, leaving her in a dim, gray half-light. And the silence, it was unsettling. Not the peaceful kind. This was the kind that pressed on your ears and made your own heartbeat feel too loud. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Diana raised it, waved it around, walked in circles, still nothing. Not even a flicker of a bar. Of course, Ethan had mentioned upgrading his security system. Wi-Fi blocking was probably part of his antisocial little fortress. Fine. She'd knock. He couldn't ignore that. Bang. She pounded the side door. Hard. "Ethan," she called. No answer. Bang, bang. "Okay, very funny. You've made your point. Let's be grown-ups now." Still nothing. She tried the garage door release switch near the wall. It didn't respond. The smart system had fully overridden the manual operation, locked from the inside. Her fingers curled into fists. Was this seriously happening? Her Porsche sat smugly behind her, pristine and useless. The leather seats looked more mocking than luxurious now. Biscuit, her fluffy Pomeranian, had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, like this was just another bougie retreat. She envied him. Diana looked at the clock on the dashboard. She'd been in here 42 minutes. Okay, no need to panic. She rummaged through her handbag. No water, no snacks. Only a half-used lip gloss, a designer wallet, and a power bank that, unsurprisingly, was also dead. Typical. Still standing in heels, she glanced around the garage. One small window. Too high, too narrow. She'd never fit through it. She tried the side door again, banging with the base of her palm. "Ethan! This isn't funny!" A new emotion crept in. Embarrassment. What if he wasn't home? What if he had left town? Her chest tightened at the thought. She was Diana Kingsley. She ran a regional real estate empire. Her face had been in 3 local magazines. She wasn't the kind of woman who got locked in garages like a burglar. And yet, here she was sweating, pacing, and now barefoot because her heels were digging into her arches. The panic didn't come all at once. It seeped in, slow, toxic, quiet. She sat down on the cool concrete floor, back against the wall. Her legs ached. Her pride throbbed. This was a joke. This would be over soon. Someone would notice. Clara, her daughter maybe. Or Derek, her ex-husband. Or one of the neighbors. Surely someone would miss her. She stared at the garage door. Still closed. Still silent. Still hers, apparently. For the first time in a long, long time, Diana Kingsley felt small. Clara Kingsley hated Tuesdays. They were the most performative day of the week. Her mom always had back-to-back virtual meetings from the home office. Her stepdad called just to remind her about posture. And dinner always ended with a salad that somehow tasted like tension. But today was oddly quiet. Too quiet. No calls echoing through the hallway. No scent of her mom's high-end perfume trailing through the living room like a royal decree. No passive-aggressive knocks on her bedroom door asking, "Can you please take your earbuds out and join us like a normal human?" Just silence. Clara sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, organizing her camera equipment. The hobby started as an excuse to avoid family therapy, but had slowly grown into something she genuinely loved. Framing, capturing, revealing. The camera didn't interrupt. It didn't condescend. It just saw what was there. She was halfway through syncing footage for a school documentary when a notification pinged on her old iPad. It was from the garage cam. That was weird. Her mom had set up a motion detector cam months ago to monitor potential package thieves, but rarely used it. Curious, Clara opened the feed. And there she was, Diana, disheveled, sweaty, sitting cross-legged on the garage floor like a queen exiled to her own dungeon, talking to Biscuit, who looked deeply unimpressed. Clara blinked. She fast-forwarded. The next clip showed Diana trying to open the side door, screaming something inaudible, then kicking the wall in pure frustration. Clara couldn't hear the sound, but she didn't need to. The expression on her mom's face said it all. For a full minute, Clara just stared. Then she smirked. It wasn't that she wanted her mom to suffer, not exactly, but there was a strange justice to it. The woman who had taken control of everything of Clara's school, her weekends, her freedom to breathe, was now completely out of control. And nobody knew but Clara. She reached for her camera. Click. POV. When your mom thinks the world is her garage, she clipped the first 10 seconds of footage and uploaded it anonymously to TikTok using her burner account, @CCL4R4WTF. Just for laughs. Just for her. 10 minutes later, it had 1,200 views. 30 minutes later, 18,000. The comments were brutal and hilarious. Karen trapped in her own kingdom. Plot twist. The garage belongs to the actual homeowner. I can smell the entitlement through the screen. Clara didn't laugh. Not really. Because deep down, she knew this would cross a line. But for once, it wasn't her being punished. It wasn't her who was invisible. It wasn't her locked inside a role she didn't choose. For the first time in a long time, Clara had the power. And she wasn't sure what to do with it yet. She watched the feed again. Her mom was pacing now, yelling something toward the ceiling, maybe at God, or Ethan, or just the concept of being ignored. Clara tilted her head and whispered toward the screen, "Maybe this time you'll actually listen." Then she hit record. By the morning of the third day, the heat inside the garage was unbearable. Diana's designer blouse clung to her skin like punishment. Her carefully applied foundation had long since melted into streaks of frustration. The once crisp scent of her lavender car diffuser had faded, overtaken by sweat, stale coffee, and the unmistakable musk of confinement. Biscuit whimpered softly, his little paws curled beneath him on the back seat. "Don't look at me like that," Diana muttered, wiping her face with a silk scarf that now smelled like regret. She had stopped screaming. That had ended somewhere around hour 16, when her voice cracked, and the only response she got was her own echo and a couple of passing cars that didn't even slow down. Even Ethan hadn't returned. Or maybe he had. Maybe he'd seen the camera feed, noticed she was still inside, and decided she deserved it. The thought burned more than the heat. She sat down against the far wall of the garage, hugging her knees like a child. Her manicured nails, once weapons of power, were chipped and dirty. Her Apple Watch had died overnight. Her phone, too. Time no longer existed. It was just light, then dark, then light again. She started talking to the overhead bulb. "Clara's probably on her phone right now, not even wondering where I am." The bulb did not respond. "Derek hasn't called. Typical." Still nothing. She stared at the mirror of her SUV. Her reflection was barely recognizable. The bags under her eyes, the dull sheen of her hair, the vulnerability. She hated it. But she couldn't look away. And for the first time in years, Diana Kingsley asked herself a question she had never dared to before. What if I'm the one who's wrong? Not just about the garage, about everything, about her marriage. How much she had blamed Derek for being passive, while steamrolling every choice that made him feel needed. About Clara. How she constantly tried to mold her into a version of herself, instead of asking what Clara actually wanted. About her reputation, how she wore power like perfume, intoxicating but shallow. A memory surfaced. Her mother, cold and stern, slapping her hand off the piano keys when she was 7. If you're not perfect, Diana, you're nothing. For decades, she had built a fortress around herself from ambition and image. Now, she was literally locked inside one. How poetic. She laughed. Not a pretty laugh. A laugh that cracked and came out too high, like a balloon deflating. "I'm talking to myself," she said aloud. "I've officially lost it." Biscuit gave her a pitiful look. Diana crawled over to him, pressed her forehead against his tiny skull, and whispered, "I'm sorry." She didn't know if she meant it for him, or Clara, or herself, probably all three. Then she curled up on the floor, next to the dog, and let herself cry, not the controlled tears of a socialite playing victim, but the raw sobs of someone realizing they weren't bulletproof anymore. Outside, the sun rose again. Inside, something in Diana finally broke free, but it wasn't the lock. It was the lie that she was untouchable. And that was the beginning of something real. The garage door creaked open on the 5th morning like it had a sense of drama. For a brief, disoriented second, Diana didn't even flinch. Her body had grown accustomed to the stifling dark, the stale air, the cycles of silence, and her own inner monologue. But then she heard footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate. Ethan. She stood too quickly, stumbling. Biscuit yelped at her feet. Sunlight sliced across the concrete, sharp and golden. And then there he was, Ethan Weller, wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, and holding a coffee like he'd just gotten back from yoga. "Good morning," he said casually. Diana blinked against the sun, shielding her eyes with a trembling hand. "You," she rasped. "You knew." He took a sip. "Eventually, yes." "You locked me in," she hissed. "You can't do that. I could sue you. I could have died in there." "I didn't know you were in there when I locked the garage," he replied evenly. "But once I did know," he shrugged. "You told me to be a good neighbor and let you park. I figured I'd honor your request." Her jaw dropped. "That's not legal?" he cut in, pulling out his phone. "I'm glad you brought that up." He tapped the screen. A still image popped up, security footage. Diana walking into the garage. Diana waving off his protest. Diana ignoring the sign on the wall that read, "Private property, surveillance, in use." "I have 3 angles," Ethan said, scrolling. "One from inside, one from the driveway, and one from the street cam showing you entering without consent. That's trespassing, by the way. Also, I saved your voicemail." He pressed play. Her own voice rang out, echoing through the garage. "It's just a garage, Ethan. You weren't using it. I'll be out soon. Stop being dramatic." Diana's face flushed crimson. "And in case you're thinking of claiming emotional distress," Ethan added, "you might want to explain this." He flipped the screen again. TikTok. @CL4R4 WTF. 4.2 million views. Title. POV. My mom thinks she owns the whole block. Then this happened. The video was silent footage of Diana pacing like a queen losing her crown, talking to Biscuit, shaking the garage door, then eventually collapsing in a heap of silk and pride. The comments were savage. "Entitlement speedrun. This is Oscar-worthy karma. Wait till she finds out it was her kid who filmed this." Diana's world tilted. "Clara." "She had access to the garage cam, right?" Ethan said. "Pretty clever girl." She staggered back, grabbing the Porsche's mirror for support. This is character assassination." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You built the character. The internet just took notes." Suddenly, a car rolled up the driveway. Clara stepped out, backpack, hoodie, calm face, no makeup, all clarity. "Mom," she said gently, "you okay?" Diana couldn't speak. Clara looked at Ethan. "I'm here to get her. I figured it was time." He nodded. "She's all yours. Diana whispered. You posted that? Clara didn't flinch. I didn't make you act that way. I just stopped pretending you didn't. It was a punch wrapped in silk, and it landed. No screaming, no slapping, just silence. And in that silence, something broke for real this time. 1 week later, the neighborhood was still buzzing. In the HOA group chat, usually filled with petty complaints about garbage bins and lawn heights, people were sharing memes of Diana's viral moment. Someone had even photoshopped her onto the poster of The Shawshank Redemption, except the title now read, Garage Queen, Redemption Not Included. The video had crossed 5 million views. Diana hadn't left her house since. Clara, on the other hand, was thriving. She transferred back to her old public school, applied for a digital media internship, and perhaps most surprising of all, kept in touch with Ethan. Every afternoon, she stopped by his porch. Still going viral? He asked one day, handing her a soda. Number 8 on TikTok's trending chart, she said, taking a sip. Mom told me if I don't take it down, she'll write me out of her will. Ethan smirked. You planning to? Clara shook her head. She doesn't own my voice. Not anymore. Wait, dear. The two of them sat in silence for a moment, watching a squirrel dart across the front lawn. Then Clara said, more quietly, she's embarrassed, but I think something cracked open in her. That's usually how light gets in, Ethan replied. She looked over at him. Are you always this poetic? Or just when you've humiliated a CEO with a garage door? He chuckled. I pick my moments. Across the street, the Kingsley house sat still. The Porsche was gone. Clara had convinced her mom to sell it. She took Ubers, now less dramatic. But what truly shook the neighborhood wasn't the viral video. It was what Diana did next. She resigned from her position on the HOA advisory board. No press release, no excuses. Just a quiet letter dropped into every mailbox. Handwritten, signed. For those I dismissed, I apologize. For those I ignored, I'm learning. I thought control was power. I forgot humility is stronger. No one expected it. But somehow, that small act did more than her legal threats, money, or image ever could. That weekend, Ethan repainted the garage door. Not because it needed it, but because it felt like turning a page. Fresh white, clean lines, no dents, no memory of sweat or screams. But he did add something, a wooden sign above the keypad. Carved simply, it read, Boundaries are beautiful. Later that afternoon, a package arrived at his front door. No return address. Inside, a jar of homemade dog treats, a bottle of cold brew, and a small, folded note. For Biscuit, for your patience, for your silence louder than my noise. D. Ethan stood there, note in hand, wind brushing against the edge of his porch. He didn't smile, not exactly. But he didn't frown either. Some victories don't come with applause. They come with understanding.